Hi, this is Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation Podcast. This podcast isn't some magic trick about how to work less. Instead, it's about how to really enjoy the work that you do and to enjoy your vacation time. Hi, I'm Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation. Why do most of us prefer Friday to Sunday? It's odd when you think about it, right? Friday is a working day in most countries, and Sunday is a day of rest. And still, the entire week we're going Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We're waiting with bated anticipation for Fridays. The reason is probably apparent to you by now. Friday clearly and consistently holds the promise of the weekend, that weekend which is to follow. We all know what follows Sunday, don't we? Anticipation. That's one of the big reasons why you need to have a waiting list. Anticipation creates an enormous amount of drama in our minds. If you and I have to wait for something, there's a pretty good chance that we are going to value that product. We're going to value that service. And it's going to be a lot more than if you just hit some magic button and you get an instant delivery. There's not one, but 3 reasons why we create waiting lists. The first reason, as we considered already, is anticipation. The second is to create a temporary barrier. And the third is to get opt-in or commitment. Let's take a deeper dive, shall we? Let's look at anticipation. In 2010, some British ministers came up with something pretty bizarre. They suggested that if you were going to apply for British citizenship, you had to learn to queue. Learn to queue, as in stand in a line. It sounds pretty funny to us, but at that time, the immigration minister, Phil Wallace, was dead serious. He suggested that to-be citizens would need to learn to queue. And this is what he said. The simple act of taking one's turn is one of the things that holds our country together. It is very important that newcomers take their place in queues, whether it is for a bus or a cup of tea. Yes, it still sounds bizarre, but that's anticipation. That's anticipation in a nutshell. And you might not like queues. Nobody likes queues, but it's anticipation in a nutshell. Queuing or waiting for something is what creates anticipation. We just like stuff better when we have to wait. Tali Sharrett is an associate professor of cognitive neuroscience, and she's in the Department of Experimental Psychology at University College London. And she gives an example, a simple example of how anticipation works, and she does so from the TED stage.
Regardless of the outcome, the pure act of anticipation makes us happy. The behavioral economist George Lowenstein asked students in his university to imagine getting a passionate kiss from a celebrity, any celebrity. Then he said, "How much are you willing to pay to get a kiss from a celebrity if the kiss was delivered immediately, in 3 hours, in 24 hours, in 3 days, in 1 year, in 10 years? He found that the students were willing to pay the most not to get a kiss immediately, but to get a kiss in 3 days. They were willing to pay extra in order to wait. Now, they weren't willing to wait a year or 10 years. I mean, no one wants an aging celebrity, but 3 days seemed to be the optimum amount. So why is that? Well, if you get the kiss now, it's over and done with. But if you get the kiss in 3 days, well, that's 3 days of jittery anticipation, the thrill of the wait. The students wanted that time to imagine, where is it going to happen? How is it going to happen? Anticipation made them happy.
A waiting list is all about anticipation, isn't it? No matter whether you're about to sell a product or a service or training, it would do all of us a bit of good to create some sort of waiting list, some sort of cooling off period. And waiting lists work for a simple reason. It creates that feeling of scarcity, even if you're not exactly well known in your field. Take the example of Joseph Pilates. When Pilates started out his studio, he wasn't just an unknown, he was also an immigrant to the US. He also had a German accent. That didn't stop him from creating a waiting list. But first, he had to find out where his clients were going to hang out. And he found a dance studio. Obviously, dancers dance and they get injured and they need some treatment or they need strength exercises. And that's what Pilates had developed. And so he sets up there and then he decides, okay, I'm going to set up this waiting list. What's the waiting list about? Well, when people called in, they would say, my foot is hurt or this is hurt. And he would say, okay, I have an appointment 2 weeks from now. Often he was doing absolutely nothing. He was just sitting around there and killing flies, as we would say. And yet he would say, 2 weeks from now. And that created anticipation, that created that need. And when the client came in, they were more than happy to get started. But how long can you keep a waiting list? Or how long can you keep that cooling off period? In the case of a kiss, it needed to be short. It needed to be about 2 or 3 days. But in certain cases, it can go for a very long time. A few years ago, I bought a cigar-shaped Nakaya pen from Japan. And if you like fountain pens, you can bow now because Nakaya is easily one of the most revered pens. Solar orange in color, the nib is fashioned to your writing style. And yes, the nib is made from 22 karat gold. It comes with its own fancy box and a whole bunch of stuff that justifies its price. And as you'd expect, you can't just walk in and buy a Nakaya. That would ruin everything, wouldn't it? The joy of owning a Nakaya is in telling the story, telling this story. So there I was, I booked the Nakaya pen and I was told that I would have to wait for 9 months, at least 9 months. And then 9 months turned to a year turned to a year and a half, and I'm still waiting. And by the time it showed up, I'd almost given up any hopes of owning that Nakaya pen. Which brings us to the second point of anticipation. Some anticipation can be relatively quick, some months long. The main factor is to keep that flame alive while the client is waiting. Waiting for the Nakaya pen was partly interesting, partly a real pain. I didn't get any updates on what was happening. And as a client, I had to follow up. Now that's not good practice, especially since the delivery was somewhere in the future, unspecified date. Even if the delivery time is well into the future, it's a good idea to keep the client in at least a mild state of anticipation, or the whole experience quickly turns to irritation. Pilates' system wasn't complex. He created a list. Anyone can do that. And it doesn't matter what you use. Maybe it's a notebook, maybe it's some appointment software, it's some kind of form online. The first task is to create that list. That list alone, that creates the first level of anticipation. And believe me, it makes a big difference to how clients perceive your offering. Take, for example, the home study courses that we have at Psychotactics. One of the downsides of creating content is that there is this eagerness, almost a lust for creating new products. It's so much fun to create new products. It's so much fun to create yet another course, yet another podcast, yet something else that you're going to create in the future. And when this happens, your older products, they go to the back shelf, the shelf at the back of the room, and they are just as powerful, they work just as well, but now the spotlight's taken off them. And that's because you have limited bandwidth. You have to promote some new products, some new programs, some new workshops, some new app. And at Psychotactics, we had that problem too. But 2016 changed that for us. In 2016, I overdid things a bit. I rewrote the entire article writing course. So it went from version 1 to version 2.0. Well, actually it's in version 2.1, but let's not get picky. So anyway, I like to do things live, which means that I rewrote all the notes, re-recorded all the audio, and moved around whole sections of the course. Stuff that was in week 8 moved to week 2, and let's just say it was like trying to refuel a plane while flying it. Anyway, that fried me a bit, and I couldn't do any more courses that year. Which is when Renuka and we sat down and we decided, let's bring out all the stuff that we've already done. We have the uniqueness course, the copywriting course, there's so many courses. And since I wasn't going to conduct the article writing course in 2017, that too went on the list of courses that we were going to sell. Now we were going to sell these as home studies. So we created waiting lists. And just because we are weird, we kept the list down to a fixed number, which meant that we'd only sell 25 copies. As you can tell, scarcity works really well, and the sales of the product replaced me. Instead of me doing a course, just the combination of the waiting list, the anticipation, and the scarcity, there was enough revenue so that I could do something else instead of conducting a course. It completely replaced the income, the energy that I was putting on the course. So that was a good thing. Now, if you're just starting out, Pilates is an example, an excellent example of how to go about things. He didn't do anything fussy. He just created anticipation by making people wait, by making them queue in an imaginary line. And that's the first point to consider when you're designing a waiting list. The first element to put in place. You have to create the anticipation. And for anticipation to work, there has to be some kind of reward, some kind of need to wait in the first place. But we'll get to that shortly. Yes, there's anticipation for that. We'll find out exactly what you need to do. However, this brings us to the end of the first part. The first part is that waiting lists create anticipation. And we may say, well, we don't like to wait. We hate queues. We hate all of that stuff. That's not what psychology teaches us. Psychology teaches us that we like anticipation. If you ask for $50 and someone just takes out $50 and gives it to you, that's not good. Even waiting for 2 or 3 minutes while they think about it, now you think that the $50 is worth a lot more than what they're giving you. So that anticipation works. We have to put that in our business, make clients wait just a little bit, and we'll get to it shortly. But for now, we've finished with anticipation. Let's go to the second one, which is barriers. Not complete barriers, not the Great Wall of China, but barriers that kind of slow the client down. Let's find out what barriers are all about, shall we? You know, the good thing about running a business like Psychotactics is that we've had a chance to do almost anything and everything you can think of as marketers. So we haven't just stayed online. We've done seminars and workshops and speeches. And let's go to the seminar bit, because if you host a valuable seminar and you charge a lot, will more people show up, or is it better to have one free of cost? Back in March 2007, we had the chance to test the free option. We decided that we wanted to give back to New Zealand because we got so much from this strange and lovely country. We decided that we'd have free marketing events under the brand name The Learning Rock. You could come to this event and there would be no upsell, no charge, and not even the Psychotactics logo anywhere in sight. In effect, we decided we were going to spend over $1,000 a year, and these were just the costs of hiring the venue. And we were not expecting anything in return. No upsell, no form, nothing, absolutely nothing. Now, we had a room capacity of 40 people. Would enough participants turn up, or would the room be half empty? The answer lay in the barrier that needed to be put in place. For one, the event was at 7:32 a.m., not 7:33, not 7:34. The doors were fastened as though with super glue. Once we'd get in, we'd close the door, that's it. There was a sticker on the door. It said, "You're late, see you next time," something like that. Now, how do we go about getting these people on the list? First, they were on our list, which is a psychotactics list, and then we'd put them on a separate list. If they showed up to the live event, then they would get a chance to be on the priority list. If, on the other hand, they didn't show up, they'd be taken off that priority list. What you're noticing are a whole bunch of barriers. They have to get there at 7:32 a.m. or before 7:32 a.m. They have to drive to the city. They have to get on this list. They have to make sure that they come to the event and not skip events. And all of these barriers seem like a good way to ruin a business. And yet, the room was packed to the brim every single time. And that was because people felt they had to earn their spot there. They had to keep their spot there. And they had to make sure that they were on time. Otherwise, they would lose out. So barriers, they play a very significant role in creating a filtered waiting list. You've seen waiting lists online, probably offline. Having a barrier of sorts makes a big difference to the quality of the clients. And you might think, well, I'm just selling digital products. What does it matter? I'm just selling some physical products, maybe a water bottle online. Doesn't matter. I think that you need to have certain products and certain services where there are barriers and some where there are no barriers. But having the barrier makes a big difference. In our case, we have courses, we have workshops, we have events, and we put a very tiny barrier, which is you have to read the brain audit. So when clients are buying more expensive products like the home study products or something like the article writing course, which will start in July, that's the live course. The home study version is in April, but all of these things still have the barrier. You still have to have read the brain audit, you still have to be on the waiting list. If you're not on the waiting list, you get no notification and you don't know anything about the product and you miss out. And it sounds like a complete recipe for disaster, but it's not. And it's not because of the attraction factor. It's because of what we promise, which is that you don't just get information, but you get a skill when you finish that course or when you do that home study thing. So it's a combination of several things. The first thing that we looked at was this anticipation. The second was having that waiting list. The third was the barrier. Having all of these elements in place makes a big difference. And of course, we add scarcity to it. Nobody says, we're going to have just 25 copies of a home study, but that's what we do. We have 25 copies of a home study. We have, say, 35 people on the cartooning course, or we have 15 people for the workshop that we're going to have on landing pages. So we reduce those numbers, and that's what creates the scarcity. But there's also the attraction factor. So a whole bunch of concepts. But all of this is not new to you. You've had to buy something, you've had to anticipate, you've had to wait for it, you've had to be sometimes on a waiting list, and you've had that barrier. And this is something that you should think, well, how am I going to replicate this in my business? Now, the barrier doesn't always have to be this massive, you have to read this book kind of thing. It could be just that they fill in a form, or maybe they have to read page 63 to 68 of a report. You wouldn't start at 1, would you? You start at 63 to 68. That's much better. At 5000 BC, for instance, there is this cooling off period. You sign into 5000 BC, you get on a waiting list, and you pay $10 to be on that waiting list. Now, it's not a long waiting list. It is just a cooling off period rather than a waiting list. And 21 days later, you're in 5000 BC. But we don't want people who are in a hurry. We want to filter them. So we have a barrier in place, and we get the person to put $10 down, small as it may be, And that's why we get better clients in 5000 BC. That's why people are kind and helpful and friendly, and they're willing to put in that effort rather than press a button and let's go. Press a button and everything gets downloaded. So what you're trying to do is kind of run your business, make it successful, but also putting the barriers in place makes a huge difference in the way the client perceives you. When you are too eager to please, well, you're too eager to please. And I know lots of people say you should make everything easy on the internet. That's not what we've done. That's not what we've done at all over the years. And people have been confused. They're confused about how we run our business, because when you look at the fact that we've been around since 2000, that's 18 years, we don't have as much traffic as a lot of the sites that started 10 years later, or even 12 years later, or 15 years later. We don't seem to be known very much. We don't seem to be on stage everywhere. We're like undercover agents. And yet, as you know, we have a 3-month vacation. We've had that since 2004. We have a very high profit margin. We keep almost all the money that we make. We don't blow it up on fancy stuff at events and stuff like that. And the reason for that is because clients stick with us. So they come in, they buy the brain audit, they get into 5000 BC, they do a course, they realize, wow, I've got this skill. They do a second course, a third course, a fourth course. What we're looking at is that even within that system, there are barriers. So when a client finishes one course and goes to a second course, they still have the barriers. As they go to more fancy stuff, like for instance, when we did the Protégé sessions, they had even bigger barriers. They had to cross 2 or 3 barriers. And you think, it doesn't make sense. You already know this client. But it's anticipation, it's scarcity, it's the whole perception of the client. And even if they know that you're doing this, which is what I'm telling you, this is what we do. You know that we do it on purpose. And yet, when it comes to that situation, you want to be part of that group. So you can spend all day fiddling around with keywords and SEO and all the technology, which is great, which is wonderful, but there's human psychology. And human psychology, at least with regard to waiting lists, teaches us these first 2 things that we'll cover more in the next session. And it teaches us that the first thing is anticipation, that we want to wait. It doesn't have to be this painful wait. We want to wait. And if it's going to be a long wait, then you need to keep that client interested. And this is what we do, like even in 5000 BC. When you join 5000 BC, you pay your $10, but you get goodies along the way while you're waiting. So wait a second, I'm not just hanging around here, I'm learning more about 5000 BC, but I'm also learning more about how to run my business. So you create the anticipation. Sometimes it could be 3 days, sometimes 21 days, sometimes a year and a half. But all along the way, you are keeping that anticipation alive for the client. And then there are the barriers. And the barriers, they don't have to be this Great Wall of China. They just have to be a barrier that slows the client down. And you can do this with a form. Maybe the form has 5 boxes instead of 2. Or you can do this with reading 5 pages, maybe page 63 to 68, or how we get clients to read the brain audit before they join any course. Whatever the barrier is, don't think of it as just, okay, I'm going to block everything out. But think of it as, how can I slow them down a bit? How can I get them involved more? Maybe they just have to watch a couple of videos. In the cartooning course, we get people to watch 3 videos of Karate Kid. It's totally enjoyable, but it gives them a concept of what to expect in the cartooning course. And these are very small things that you can do. You don't have to do this big, as I keep saying, Great Wall of China. Think of something really small that would educate the customer, that would entice the customer, that would get them interested, and what you've created is a barrier. In the next episode, we'll look at commitment. We'll also look at where all of this waiting list business goes wrong. Because people say, okay, you said put a waiting list, I put a waiting list. No one wants to be on that waiting list. It's not working. Well, it's not working because it's not structured properly. Let's find out how we can do that in the next episode. So, what are we going to do today? The one thing that you can do today is to make sure that you have some kind of barrier. You're going to have some video, you're going to have some audio, you're going to have some text, you're going to have a report, you're going to have something that you can make the client read before they come to your consultation practice, before they come to your event. Whatever it is you're selling, you can have a section, something that slows them down before they get in. And it doesn't have to be a form, it can be anything. What is that anything? What is that something that you're going to do? That's what you have to figure out. What is that tiny little barrier that you're going to put in place so that they slow down a bit, and your perception, their perception of you gets so much better, different, enhanced, changed, whatever. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. Let's find out what's happening in psychotactics land. Now, you probably heard me talking about the article writing course while I was doing the podcast itself. But what are the dates? Well, there's the 6th of April and the 7th of April. What's happening on the 6th and 7th of April? This is when you can sign up for what we'd call the live course, which is a course that's held online. It's held over 12 weeks. That's about 3 months. And what we do is we go systematically over the elements of the article writing course, as it were. And you get assignments, you do the assignments. There are 5 days a week. I check the assignments every single day. And if you choose to come back and do the assignment 5 times a day or 7 times a day, then I'll be there to make sure that whatever you're doing, that gets tweaked, that gets improved. So when we say a live course, it's pretty much like a live chat at times. There's this back and forth going. And unlike other courses where you do an assignment and then it gets checked once a week and then you do the next assignment. No, this is not like that. We want you to get the skill. We don't want you to just get more information. So on the 6th, that's when 5000 BC members will get a notification and then you can sign up. The course itself starts in July, but you're signing up on the 6th of April. If you're not in 5000 BC, then you might get the chance on the 7th of April. It happens, but most of the time, 5000 BC members take most of the seats, if not all the seats. So if you're a 5000 BC member, then you get in on the 6th of April, otherwise the 7th of April. Now I'm repeating myself. Anyway, that's that. But if you decide, hey, I don't want to do this 5 days a week because I've got other things to do and I would prefer a home study version, well, that is something that you can get on the 12th of April. Now, that's downloadable. You work at your own pace. I'm not in your face all the time. You don't have to be part of a group. You might find that that is better for you. When I was starting out, there were times when I had to do something live in a course, and sometimes I just got a home study version of it, did it at my own pace. So you decide which one you want to do. Now, this whole podcast would be wasted if we didn't get you on a waiting list, right? So there is a waiting list, and it's called psychotactics.com/AW goodies. So AW stands for article writing. So psychotactics.com/AW goodies. And that gets you on that waiting list. Now, you're not just going to get sales pitches, you're going to get information, articles on article writing. So you're going to get content on article writing. And if you choose not to sign up for the article writing course, that's cool. but if you do, then that gets you on that waiting list. So it's important that you go to psychotactics.com/awgoodies and you get your goodies. $5,000BC is our membership site. You think, well, I've been part of membership sites, but this is different. And it's different, one, because I'm there all the time, or most of the time. You ask a question, you get an answer. Often you'll get a whole bunch of articles in response to your question. And there's no anticipation. Often you ask a question and then it's, again, almost like chat. You ask the question, you get an answer, you might come back and say, well, this is my objection, I'll get another answer. Sometimes the whole bunch of articles will be written. That might take 2 or 3 days. But the point is that this is your question. This is your problem. And it gets answered. How does it get done and why does it get done? It's because I'm not so interested in going out there and doing all this marketing. I'm not so interested in being on stages and doing that stuff. I love that stuff, but it takes so much time and so much effort, and by the time you get back, you have to recover, and it's much better working with clients. And this is the reason why clients stay with us, is because I get a chance to work with them, but I learn so much. I mean, the whole thing is about finding that missing piece of the puzzle. And when you ask those questions, I can answer them. And when you bring up the objections, I can tweak it and we can make all of this better. So 5000BC is this place where you get your problem solved. I get my problem solved because I'm able to figure out something that I couldn't figure out before just by answering your question. That's how you become a teacher, by the way. You become a teacher by teaching. That's how you learn. And that's what I enjoy doing. So join us in 5000BC. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. And I also want to thank Renuka, because all of the transcripts, all of the stuff that you see, just the fact that you get the notifications for this podcast, Renuka does all of that stuff. Joe Norton, on the other hand, handles all the music. He makes sure that this podcast stands out from all the podcasts out there. And he just does a fabulous job. So thanks, Joe, and thanks, Renuka. And now it's time for me to go and find a coffee, I'm sure. I'll say bye for now. Bye-bye. Still listening? One of the really critical bits of any marketing is testimonials. And how do you know that to be true? Well, I was on audible.com maybe 3-4 months ago, maybe November or something, and they wanted me to finish my credits because, you buy all these credits and then you have to finish them. And I thought, well, let me go and check out some books. And while I was there, I saw some testimonials for a book on plagues. Yeah, you heard that right. I did say plagues, like those killing machines. It was about the bubonic plague, about the Antonine plague, and you think, wow, that sounds like just perfect listening material. But I read the testimonials, and the testimonials went on and on about how great this book was, how much fun it was, and I thought, I have to listen to this book just to find out how plagues could be funny. And I'll tell you something, it's absolutely hilarious. It's called Get Well Soon, and I forget the author's name, but you don't have to remember the author's name right now. It's just Get Well Soon. And it's read out so well, and it's so funny that what I do is I listen to some podcasts, and I listen to audiobooks, and I listen to stuff that's interesting, and then I go to plagues. And yeah, my walk is so much better. So I don't know if you have a list of 50,000 books that you haven't read, but if you consider reading this book, it's called Get Well Soon. I think you'll enjoy it. And now let's have some blues and finish off this podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in 5000BC or on one of the courses. Bye-bye.